What's up, guys? Zach here, and we are back on the normal routine of the weekly videos. And I know a lot of you guys have been asking me when I'm going to be releasing another video that is motorcycle related about the 959. So I have big news. Well, not really big news, but around this time of year, as everyone who rides knows, there's a stretch of time where the sun starts to come out, it starts to get a little bit warmer, and you are all excited about spring, and it's really just a tease. You know, you get a couple days here and there, and you pull your bike out, and then it's freezing again. But thankfully, we are still in the midst of this warm spell. So I just got my 959 out of winter storage yesterday, and I went on a first ride, and I decided to bring along my GoPro so that I could sort of just film, you know, the first ride back in DC, back in the city for spring 2021 with the 959. And I figured now, you know, I've been meaning to do a video on the top 5 things that I love about this motorcycle now that I've owned it for about a year at this point. You know, obviously a couple months is spent in winter storage, but I've put about 2,500 miles on it. I've gotten really comfortable with the bike. I've spent a lot of time with the bike, working on it, riding it, you know, riding it in different situations. So I wanted to go over the top 5 things that I love about this motorcycle. Let's jump into it. So the first thing that comes to mind when I think about why I like this bike so much more than the Ducatis that I've had in the past is the handling. You know, the way that this motorcycle performs, the way that it leans in and out of corners is just second to none compared to any of the bikes that I've had before. You know, the Street Fighter was probably the most track focused, the most serious sports bike that I owned before the Panigale. And, you know, through corners, it was very sturdy. It felt like it was on rails. It just had, the way that it leaned in and out of corners was very laborious. It was heavy, you know, so it didn't give you the feeling that you could kind of change directions quickly. You know, it felt like the bike was carrying a lot of its weight up top. So it felt like you'd start to lean over and then it would go over all at once. Now, it never made me feel like I was going to lose my line or have the wheels slide out from under me. You know, it really felt the most, you know, stable, you know, heavy on rails bike that. And what I love about the Panigale is it combines that stability, that on rails feeling, while also being really airy and light. And the way that it changes directions is just so effortless and predictable. It carries its weight different than the Street Fighter did. The Street Fighter felt like it had all its weight up top, and it was really, you had to lean the bike over and then it would feel like it would go all at once, whereas the 959 just feels simple, it feels effortless. You know, it's almost telepathic. You lean the bike in, you can pull the bike back over, and it feels like it's locked in, it's gonna hold the line, and it doesn't even feel like you're really fighting the machine when you're going around the corner. It just feels like, you know, it's you're one. And I know that sounds cliche to say, but the bikes that I've been the best rider on and the bikes that I've loved the most are motorcycles where I don't think about the bike that I'm riding. It just kind of is telepathic. You know, you think what you want to do and the bike does it. And that is my favorite thing about this bike, for sure. It is definitely, in the year that I've owned it, made me a significantly better rider, a more confident rider. You know, I'm definitely taking corners, you know, at speeds that I was never able to do so before, and my lean angle has definitely improved. You know, and it really probably isn't even so much about the capabilities of the bike itself, because I know the Street Fighter is a really, really capable motorcycle in, you know, the right hands. I think just for me, the way that this bike makes me feel as a rider has definitely made me more comfortable pushing my limits a little bit more, and it just really fits, you know, the style that I am looking to do when I'm riding the bike, and you know, it's very confidence inspiring. So that's the first thing. The handling, second to none. That's my number 1 favorite thing about this bike. So number 2, and we might as well get this out of the way early, the looks. This bike is one of the most beautiful motorcycles, in my opinion, that's ever been made. I mean, the way that the lines, you know, cut down, it's purposeful, you know, from the tail all the way up to the front. It just, every single time you see one of these on the street, it almost doesn't even seem real. And that's the way that I use to describe, like, anytime I see a Ferrari or a Lamborghini or you know, especially nowadays a McLaren, it just stands out. It's very striking. It doesn't even seem like it's, you know, part of this world in some ways. So the way that this motorcycle looks from every single angle is just absolutely drop dead gorgeous. You know, in my opinion, you know, the 959, the 1299 are the best looking motorcycles ever made. You know, I'm sure many of you could argue that the 916 and a few others are definitely up there as well, and I would not disagree. This is just personal preference. I think those are beautiful motorcycles too, but the way that this bike looks, it gets me excited to ride every single day that I get up and I'm about to hop on it. And every single time that I stop, I find myself, you know, anybody who's a car guy or motorcycle guy, you do the little look back as you're walking away, and it just brings a smile to my face every single time. So, you know, the way that this bike looks, you know, the way that it draws a ton of attention on the street, you feel like you're rolling around on something special, which, you know, you really can't beat that. So that's number 2 on my list. So number 3 is actually an interesting one. Number 3 for me is the power band, which, funny enough, was actually the one thing that I didn't like about this bike the first time that I rode it, and for the first couple weeks that I owned it. You know, coming from, you know, a 696 and 1100 Evo, you know, air-cooled bikes that had a lot of low-end torque, and even the Street Fighter, I mean, that was a water-cooled motorcycle and it definitely had more of a top end, but it still had that sort of lower-end grunt, and both of those were, you know, cable throttles as opposed to ride-by-wire. So I was coming from some of the more old-school Ducatis, not really like pre-Audi Ducati where, you know, they're carbureted, anything like that. These were still fuel-injected bikes, but riding air-cooled motorcycles around the city, which is primarily where I do most of my riding, they definitely had that lower end torque, that lower end grunt that made them feel really fast around town. It was easy to, you know, pop a wheelie between stoplights. You know, it just made them feel very quick at lower speeds around town. So for the first couple weeks on my Panigale, I was really not a fan of how the power band sort of built, and then at the top is really where you got that kick. But it was really just something I had to get used to. Now that I'm used to the bike, I love it. You know, having spent a lot more time on the back roads and hopefully going to spend some time on the track, I can see how that power band is definitely a lot more intuitive, a lot more useful. It just fits and suits the nature of the bike. And now that I'm used to it, I actually prefer it. You know, I've gotten very comfortable. I managed to be able to do wheelies around town still just by simply manipulating the power band and kind of having a greater understanding of the bike. So for the first couple weeks, you know, coming from the air-cooled bikes, it was a little bit iffy. You know, this is my first full-on sports bike, so I knew this was going to be something because, you know, the nature of these bikes are different. But now that I'm used to it, I absolutely love the power band. You know, it builds and it has that really, really awesome top end, sort of in the same vein that my V8 M3 had. You know, it just felt like an absolute gem of an engine, and it just would pull harder and harder the faster you go, and that makes the Panigale really, really exciting to ride. So number 4, and this is actually another instance of something that I didn't like at first, but I've now grown to like more than on my previous bikes, and that's the levers on this motorcycle. So the Street Fighter that I had and the Monster that I had, but particularly the Street Fighter, had very heavy levers. And what I mean by that is, you know, the clutch lever was very laborious, it was heavy, same with the brake. And, you know, at first that made me sort of feel like they were very precise. And so at first when I was riding the Panigale, it felt sort of spongy. They were too light and easy to use. And at first that kind of made me feel like, okay, you know, I don't feel as in tune with my clutch lever and my brakes. But over time, now that I've gotten used to it, I've realized that, and I'm just by using them over and over again, they are equally as precise, just simply easier to use and easier on your hands. So, you know, my hands don't get cramps, they don't get tired when I'm going around town using them. Makes it easier for me to do things like, you know, clutch up wheelies or burnouts, any of those things that I want to do. It's just a lot simpler. Having the easier clutch and brake levers makes my whole experience a lot easier. And number 5, and last but not least, you know, this sort of encompasses everything that I've been saying about the bike, but number 5 is the versatility. This is by far the most versatile bike that I've owned. You know, some of you might disagree and say that the Street Fighter sort of offers that naked bike around town flair, but then also is a great bike on the track. But for me personally, you know, this bike just fits me and the type of riding that I like to do, and you know, it has made me such a confident rider on the back roads. I feel like my rider skill, you know, my comfort level, you know, just me as a, you know, rider in my 5th, 6th year with motorcycles, I've taken the biggest leap this year, you know, in comparison to all the other years combined. So this bike is incredibly versatile. It is confidence inspiring. It has grown my riding in such a big level just through going on trips, hitting the back roads, and I haven't even had the chance to take it to the track yet. And I'm really, really excited for, you know, coming up in 2021. I'm going to be filming videos on that, taking this bike to the track for the first time. But you know, not only that, I daily ride this motorcycle every day in the city, in Washington, D.C., and you know, some might say it's an uncomfortable position. It's a sport bike, you know, you're leaned over, it's got the low handlebars, but for me, I've found it to be actually very manageable around town. And I think that, you know, a lot of that has to do with, like I said, the levers are not, you know, incredibly hard to use. It's very simple. The bike is light, it's nimble, so, you know, going through town, weaving through the streets and everything has really been easy, you know, to get used to. I mean, the one thing that makes this bike less user-friendly in the city than the 1100 Evo is just the lower down torque. But even then, this bike still has a ton of power, even in the lower RPMs, certainly plenty to be able to get around town in a quick manner. So that's it for me, guys. Those are the 5 things that I love about the Ducati Panigale 959 that I've owned for this past year. Leave a like, drop a comment if you'd like me to do 5 things that I hate about this bike, because there are a few things that I am not a fan of as well. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. You know, other things coming out in the next couple of months. We are moving to New York City. I released a video about that last week. I'm going to be documenting that process, our apartment search, our neighborhood search, you know, everything that goes into moving into New York in 2021. And I will, of course, be talking about what it's like owning the Panigale in New York City. I can't wait to get up there, you know, sort of integrate myself into the scene, check out the city on the bike. Yeah, drop a comment below, drop a like. Thank you guys so much. I'm really enjoying making these videos. The past couple of months have been an awesome journey, and you guys are making this all possible. I do it for you guys. I'm excited about what's coming up. If you have any other video ideas that you would like to see from me in regards to the Panigale, in regards to my gear, I have a couple more reviews coming out. Drop those comments below, and I will see you guys next week. See ya.